The battle was supposed to be over. General Vakorr stood atop the command platform of his warship, gazing down at the battlefield below. The planet, designated Dracos 4, was nothing but a desolate war zone now. Craters from orbital bombardments, burning wreckage of vehicles, and the twisted remains of once mighty defenses. And in the center of it all, one last human battalion. They were surrounded, cut off, no reinforcements, no retreat. Vakorr's forces had spent weeks systematically dismantling the Terran defenses. Their fleets had blockaded the system. Their artillery had reduced entire strongholds to rubble. The humans had fought fiercely, as they always did, but their defeat had been inevitable. This was the final engagement. The last remnants of the 132nd Terran Battalion, barely 200 men, were now trapped inside the ruins of an abandoned mining facility. No escape. No hope. "This battle is over," Vakorr said, his voice calm, assured. "They will surrender within the hour." Silence filled the command bridge. His officers did not respond. They had seen this before. They knew what he did not. Vakorr narrowed his slitted eyes. "What is the estimated time until their surrender?" His second-in-command, Major Koresh, hesitated. "That is uncertain, General." Vakorr's jaw tightened. "Then estimate." Koresh's mandibles clicked anxiously. "Based on previous encounters, the humans may not surrender at all." The words hung in the air, unnatural and absurd. Vakorr frowned. "That is irrational. They are cut off from reinforcements. They are outnumbered 50-1. Their position is indefensible." Koresh's eyes flicked to the data displays. "With all due respect, General, that does not mean they will stop." Vakorr turned to the tactical display, watching as his forces tightened the noose. The Surak 8th Infantry Division, one of the finest regiments in the Dominion, was already moving in. 10,000 elite warriors against barely 200 humans. This should not have even been a fight. Vakorr allowed himself a brief moment of certainty. The humans would realize their situation. They would see that resistance was futile. They would lay down their weapons, because anything else was suicide. 3 hours later, the humans were still fighting. Vakorr's clawed fingers tapped against the command panel as he stared at the live feed. Something was wrong. The battle should have ended within minutes. Instead, the humans dug in. Vakorr watched as the Surak warriors advanced into the ruined mining facility. The humans were trapped, but they fought as if they weren't. They set traps. They used the terrain. They forced the Surak warriors into tight corridors where numbers meant nothing. Vakorr's officers murmured uneasily as the casualty reports came in. Surak forces encountering resistance. Human battalion refusing surrender. Surak casualties rising. Vakorr's eyes narrowed. This wasn't possible. And yet, it was happening. He turned sharply to Koresh. "Deploy additional reinforcements. Overwhelm them." Koresh hesitated. "Sir, we've already committed." "Then commit more." Vakorr's voice was ice. Koresh obeyed. But even as more Surak forces poured into the battlefield, the humans refused to die. 6 hours later, Vakorr's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. The humans were still alive. His forces had launched wave after wave against them, yet the Terrans held. Their defensive position was crumbling, their supplies were dwindling, their numbers were dropping. And yet, they kept fighting. The humans were bleeding, dying, but they did not stop. Vakorr could hear it through the intercepted comms. Human voices, hoarse, exhausted, but unbroken. "Hold the line. They want us to break? Let them come and make us. Out of ammo. Pick up theirs. Bayonets ready." Vakorr felt something he had not felt in years, a slow, creeping unease. "This is unnatural," he muttered. Koresh exhaled shakily. "General, we have seen this before." Vakorr turned to his second-in-command. "Explain." Koresh's mandibles twitched. "Human last stand, sir." Vakorr frowned. "Elaborate." Koresh inhaled deeply, gathering his words. Other species break when the battle is lost, he said. They surrender. They retreat. They choose survival over suicide. He looked to the battle display, where humans were still killing Surak warriors with knives and bare hands. But humans, Koresh swallowed. They don't think like us. Vakorr's throat tightened. His voice was barely a whisper. Then how do they think? Koresh did not look away from the display. They don't fight to survive, he said. They fight to win. The humans should have been dead by now. Instead, they were evolving. General Vakorr clenched his jaw as he watched the battlefield display. His Surak warriors, the best infantry in the Dominion, had started the battle with discipline and formation. Now, they were falling apart. Vakorr saw the panic in real time. The structured assault had become a disorganized brawl. Surak soldiers, 10-foot-tall reptilian warriors, clad in heavy armor, armed with plasma rifles, were now fighting in brutal close-quarters combat. That was a mistake, because humans thrived in close quarters. The mining facility had become a butcher's den. Vakorr turned at the sound of Major Koresh's voice. The officer's eyes were fixed on the battle, his mandibles twitching. "What do you mean?" Vakorr growled. Koresh swallowed. "Sir, they know they can't win conventionally, so now they're fighting for something else." Vakorr's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. "What?" Koresh's voice was hollow. "They're fighting to take as many of us with them as possible." Silence. A cold, suffocating silence. Vakorr turned his gaze back to the battlefield feed, feeling something deep and primal creeping through his chest. It wasn't just that the humans refused to die, it was how they fought. The Terrans had lost their heavy weapons, but that didn't stop them. They had turned the environment into a weapon. Vakorr watched as a human soldier, his armor broken, his left arm hanging uselessly, dove onto a Surak warrior, jamming a plasma charge directly into the enemy's chest. The explosion sent both of them into the walls of the corridor. Another human, bleeding heavily, used a shattered rifle scope as an improvised knife, jamming it into a Surak's throat. Some had run out of ammunition, so they picked up enemy weapons. Others had run out of weapons entirely, so they fought with their fists, their knives, their bare hands. Tactical report. Human forces. 132nd Battalion. Initial 200. Now, 73 Surak forces. 8th Infantry Division. Initial 10,000. Now, 7,600 projected outcome. Human forces will be eliminated within 1 hour. Current status, they are still killing us. Vakorr exhaled sharply. His forces had lost nearly 2,400 soldiers against an enemy that should not have lasted 10 minutes. The tactical display flickered. Then, a message came through. Vakorr stiffened. It was from a human. The bridge crew stared at the transmission. A human's face appeared on the screen. A battle-scarred officer, helmet dented, face smeared with blood and dirt. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "This is Captain Elias Ward, United Terran Forces." Vakorr's claws tightened. He could hear gunfire in the background, explosions, screams. The human smiled. A bloody smile. "You think you've won?" Elias rasped. "You think this is over?" He coughed, spitting blood onto the floor. Behind him, Vakorr could see a row of human soldiers, wounded but standing, weapons raised. Elias leaned toward the screen. "We're not surrounded," he said. Vakorr felt a chill crawl up his spine. "We're right where we want to be." Then the screen went black. And in the next moment, the humans attacked. The humans were pushing forward. That wasn't possible. That wasn't how this worked. General Vakorr stared at the battle display, his claws trembling over the command console. His Surak warriors, 10,000 strong, were being driven back by less than 70 dying humans. Vakorr watched the battle unfold in real time, the live feeds broadcasting chaos across the command bridge. The Surak forces had forced the 132nd Battalion into the central refinery of the mining facility, cutting off every route of escape. At first, the humans fought defensively. Then, everything changed. They weren't just holding the line anymore, they were advancing. Vakorr watched as a human soldier, his left arm missing from the elbow down, sprinted forward, firing a scavenged Surak rifle in one hand, a combat knife in the other. He leapt onto a Surak officer, driving the blade into the alien's throat before spinning around and unloading plasma fire into two more. He shouldn't have been able to move like that. He should have been in shock, in agony, crawling toward a medic, begging for a pain suppressor. But humans didn't fight like that. They fought as if pain meant nothing, as if death was irrelevant. Vakorr's head snapped toward Major Koresh. The officer's scales had paled, his voice barely above a whisper. Vakorr felt rage boiling in his chest. "Fall back," he growled. "We have superior numbers. We have them outgunned, outmaneuvered." "Sir," Koresh interrupted. His voice was shaking. "We lost another 300 in the last 20 minutes. Vakorr froze. That wasn't possible. That wasn't... The battle display flickered. Then, the casualty count updated. Surak infantry remaining, 6,900. Human infantry remaining, 52. Projected outcome, error. Vakorr's claws dug into the metal of the command table. "What the hell does that mean?" The tactical AI stuttered before responding. "Projected human defeat cannot be determined." Vakorr's forces were collapsing. The humans, those stubborn, reckless, impossible creatures, had stopped retreating. They had forced their way out of the refinery. They were in the open now, and they were winning. Vakorr saw it all unfold. A wounded human, his helmet missing, a deep gash over one eye, lifted a plasma grenade in his bare hand and ran straight into a Surak formation, detonating himself in a brilliant explosion. A medic, stabbed a Surak officer with a cauterizing tool, burning through armor, flesh, and bone. A half-dead human, covered in burns, used his last breath to fire a sniper shot directly through the eye socket of a Surak warlord. And then Vakorr saw the worst thing of all. The humans were laughing. They were grinning through the blood, through the pain, through the chaos, as if they were enjoying the carnage, as if this was exactly where they wanted to be. Vakorr's blood ran cold. The Surak warriors, once so disciplined, so proud, so certain of their victory, were breaking. Vakorr could see it in their movements, the hesitation, the missed shots, the way they staggered backward every time a human refused to die. Panic was spreading. Surak squads stopped advancing. Some started falling back. And then, it happened. A Surak lieutenant dropped his rifle and ran. Just one soldier, breaking formation. And then another followed. Then another. And another. Then the whole line collapsed. Vakorr's invincible army was retreating, running, fleeing from a force that should have died hours ago. Vakorr staggered back from the display, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. He had fought 1,000 battles. He had conquered entire worlds. But this was something else. And then, the comms came to life. Vakorr turned. The human captain was on the screen again. Captain Elias Ward. He was bleeding from the temple, his armor cracked, his breathing heavy. Behind him, human soldiers stood tall, weapons raised. 52 warriors against thousands, and they had won. The humans smiled, not arrogant, not mocking, just knowing. "You should leave," Elias said. Vakorr swallowed hard. His throat was dry. "And if we don't?" The human grinned wider. "Then we'll do this all over again." Silence. Then Vakorr turned to his bridge crew and gave the only order that made sense. "Call the retreat." General Vakorr sat in silence. The battle was over, and he had lost. The Surak Dominion had never retreated from a battlefield, not in the last 3 centuries, not until today, not until they fought humans. Vakorr's scaled fingers trembled as he watched the battle logs replay on the holoscreen. The 132nd Battalion, what was left of them, were still standing in the ruined mining facility. 52 soldiers. They should have been dead. And yet, there they were, still holding their weapons, still standing on the blood-soaked ground that had once been a battlefield, as if they were waiting for someone else to come try them. Vakorr exhaled sharply. His second-in-command, Major Koresh, stood nearby, staring at the retreating fleet display. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Koresh broke the silence. "We had them surrounded." His voice was hollow. Vakorr didn't respond. "We cut them off. No reinforcements, no retreat, no supplies." Vakorr's jaw tightened. "They should have surrendered," Koresh whispered. "Any other species would have surrendered." Vakorr turned slowly. His voice was quiet. "Why didn't they?" Koresh exhaled, his mandibles clicking with unease. He didn't meet Vakorr's gaze. "Because, sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "humans don't surrender." The Surak Dominion fleet limped back to its home system, silent. The other empires were waiting. The Dominion had boasted about the invasion. They had called the war a mere formality. And yet, they had retreated. The humans, outnumbered 50-1, had stood their ground, and won. Whispers spread across the galactic networks. They fought for days without food, without rest. They used their own dead as cover. They laughed as they bled. And the worst rumor of all, their general survived. He watched it all. And now, he knows. The halls of the Surak Imperial Palace were silent as Vakorr approached the throne. He felt heavy. Not with wounds, his body was unscathed. But his soul felt broken. His forces had suffered the greatest defeat in Dominion history. And yet, the Empire had not lost any territory. The war was over, not because the Surak couldn't keep fighting, but because they refused to. Vakorr knelt before the Emperor. The great ruler of the Surak Dominion, Emperor Vakorr, studied him with narrowed reptilian eyes. "You return without victory." Vakorr's throat tightened. "Yes, my lord." Vakorr's tail flicked once, slowly. "Did they destroy our fleet?" "No." "Did they kill all our warriors?" "No." The Emperor leaned forward. "Then tell me, General, why are we not still fighting?" Vakorr closed his eyes. And then he spoke the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Because we fought humans." Silence. Deep, suffocating silence. Vakorr slowly rose to his feet. His next words came without hesitation. "I am resigning, Your Excellency." Vakorr stilled. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. Vakorr's voice was hollow. "I have seen the impossible. I have watched humans refuse to die even when death was certain." He turned away, his cape trailing behind him. "I will never command troops against them again." The war was over. The Surak Dominion did not surrender. But they did something worse. They refused to fight humans ever again. General Vakorr's resignation sent shockwaves through the Dominion. A legendary war leader, a commander with decades of undefeated campaigns, had walked away. Not because he had lost territory, not because he was forced to, but because he had seen the truth. Vakorr's name became a whispered cautionary tale among Surak warriors. He fought humans, and then he retired. The Dominion never spoke of Kesson 4 again. No war records were filed, no honors were awarded. It was as if the battle had never happened. But the galaxy remembered. The official transmission from the Surak Dominion High Command was brief. A simple statement, sent to the United Terran Forces. The Dominion has no further interest in the Kesson system. No additional military actions will be taken. This war is concluded. A formal withdrawal, a polite refusal to continue hostilities. It wasn't a peace treaty. It wasn't an admission of defeat. But it was exactly that. The 132nd Battalion, those who survived Kesson 4, became legend. Their names were engraved in Terran war records. They were called the Last Stand Battalion. Cadets at the Terran Military Academy studied their tactics. Military leaders used their story as a lesson in human endurance, and every soldier whispered their motto before every impossible battle. "We're not surrounded. We're right where we want to be." The former general disappeared from public life. Some said he retreated to a distant world, living in self-imposed exile. Others claimed he wandered the galaxy, trying to understand what he had seen. But one thing was certain. Vakorr never spoke of the battle, never set foot on a battlefield again, and never, not once, did he underestimate humans again. 100 years later, when Vakorr was old and frail, a young Surak officer sought him out. The officer knelt before him. "Tell me," he asked, "why did you leave?" Vakorr, ancient and weary, looked him in the eye. "I fought humans," he said. His voice was haunted. "I saw them laugh through the pain." He closed his eyes, and I realized, there are wars that cannot be won, and there are enemies you never fight again.